In this episode, I speak with author Alexis Cano. Key points addressed were Alexis's book slated to release on Amazon this November titled The What If Diet Plan. We also explore core values and misperceptions of intermittent fasting and how the various aspects of this folklore affected aspects of Alexis's life spanning from high school into adulthood. Stay tuned for my fascinating talk with Alexis Cano. On a quick technical side note, we suffered some internet delays and disturbances over the course of the podcast. However, because the issue does abate for the majority of the interview, our team made the decision to go up with this version rather than edit these parts out. We appreciate your understanding and know that the interview with Alexis will be worth putting up with a few audio imperfections. Thanks for listening. My name is Patricia Kathleen, and this series features interviews and conversations I conduct with experts from medicine and science to health and humanitarian arenas in an effort to explore the world of fasting from a variety of angles. This dialogue is meant to develop a more complete story about the information, research, personal stories, and culture in and around the science and lifestyle of fasting. If you're enjoying this podcast, be sure to check out our subsequent series that dive deep into specific areas such as founders and entrepreneurs, vegan life, and roundtable topics. They can be found on our website, patriciakathleen.com, where you can also join our newsletter. You can also subscribe to all of our series on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, and YouTube. Thanks for listening. Now let's start the conversation. But yeah, if you want to comment on it, if you want to say anything to it, that's great. Myself as well. The only thing I usually edit out in these is when we have internet instability, which is only 1 out of like 50 podcasts. But I am I'm very prone to tantrums with audio disturbance, not with guests, but like I'll pause and be like, hang on, I don't know what's happening. Like that's my issue because I've a tech, princess, and so I like things in order, but outside of that I'm not going to edit anything else out. And so if we do have a sound delay, which I don't anticipate, and we'll all be good to go, and everything else is fair game. So if you drop the F-bomb, she's staying in.
Awesome.
Cool. All right, Alexis Cano. Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. I am your host, Patricia, and today I'm very excited to be sitting down with Alexis Cano. Alexis is an author. You can find out more about her book and a lot of her blogging on the website, www.thewhatifdietplan.com. That is www.thewhatifdietplan.com. Welcome, Alexis.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. I'm excited too. I got, for everyone listening, I will read a bio on Alexis, and I'm also going to offer you a roadmap in which the trajectory and line of inquiry this podcast will follow is based out of. But I received an advanced manuscript of Alexis's book, and I am so very excited that she's going to allow me to kind of help unpack it with you guys today. The line of inquiry that today's podcast will follow, roadmap, if you will first look at Alexis's academic, professional, and personal background as it brought her to a fasting lifestyle and writing her book. We'll then turn to unpacking some terms that everyone seems to find rote until we start talking about them, and then we all find out that everyone defines them slightly differently in the fasting communities. Then we'll, as I said, we'll look at the sneak preview of her book, The What If Diet Plan, and we'll kind of unpack a lot of the overall ethos, philosophy of the book, and then we'll get into some of the specifics that I, as an early reader, had about commentary and questions in regards to it. And then we'll wrap everything up with our rapid fire questions, which are based from audience members writing in with questions that you may have for someone of Alexis's expertise and background that can best speak to those. So I wanted to let the audience know we do hear you, and I'm excited to get some of your questions postured to Alexis and have them answered. As promised, a quick bio on Alexis before I start peppering her with questions. Alexis Cano is a native of South Texas. She holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in psychology and is earning a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. As an advisor at a large university, she has trained and spoken at regional and national conferences on the topics of compassion fatigue. Her real life experience with weight loss and overcoming compassion fatigue has made her a sought-after commodity. Alexis is the mother of 3 boys with a passion for helping other busy moms overcome issues with food and weight. Her main goal is to help others realize they are not alone in their struggles and that every problem can be overcome with the right mindset. She outlines her simple process for overcoming food fears and losing weight permanently through intermittent fasting in her book, The What If Diet Plan, scheduled to release this fall. As I said, we're going to unpack some of that. Alexis, I'm excited to jump into it, but before we get there, I'm hoping, and we were talking off the air, but your book does such a great job of this. You really dedicate some time to walking through it, but I'm hoping you can kind of narrate for us now your own personal story regarding your fasting lifestyle, bringing you up to the point of writing the book.
Sure. So as you've read in my book, I mean, I've dealt with weight issues my entire life. Growing up, I was always chubby. I was always bigger. But I am also from a Hispanic culture. And so I think it's somewhat normal in our culture, especially down here in South Texas. When I say South Texas, I mean down South Texas. I live very close to Mexico. So not San Antonio, not Austin, nothing like that, South Texas. And so I don't even want to say I struggled with weight my whole life, because during my childhood, I really didn't see it as an issue. I just figured I was big boned. This is how it is. That's it. So finally in high school, I actually started what I call intermittent fasting in error, or IFing in error. One day I missed breakfast, and I always had breakfast. We got free breakfast at school. And if my school didn't offer it, my mother would make me some breakfast tacos with, bacon and egg and all that good stuff. So one morning I missed breakfast. I got scared. I thought, this is bad. I'm not, you're not supposed to miss breakfast, that kind of thing. And I realized it wasn't that bad. And I actually kind of liked sleeping in and not worrying about it. So then from there, I just kind of kept going and realizing, I'm shortening as much as I can, but realizing over the next few weeks that my hunger wasn't the same as it used to be. And from there, I started, eventually skipping lunch. Now, back in high school, especially in the 90s, I mean, that was not good. I was so scared. I was very secretive about it. And then the secrecy kind of made me even more scared about it, because it's like, oh, she's not eating. And, 17 years old, that's not good. You shouldn't be doing that. I mean, but I believe I was at least 230 pounds at one point. I may have been more. I never weighed myself. But by the time I finished my senior year of high school, I think I was down to 185. Then on to college. And by the time I got to college, I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to be with my dorm mates, and everyone's going to be seeing me. And I had a full meal plan. So in college, I gained the normal 15 to 20 pounds, the freshman 15. And then that's actually what started my actual dieting mentality. Back in high school, grade school, I never had diet mentality. I never knew about calories or anything like that. I didn't even know what a diet soda was. Like, I knew there was diet and not diet, but I didn't really know what it meant. Yeah. And then in college is when I started researching, okay, what can I do to lose weight? I didn't want to go back to being 230, 250, whatever it was, pounds. I didn't want to go back there. So I discovered the Atkins diet. I discovered the volumetrics diet. I mean, I tried every single diet. And the thing is, these diets do work, but they're so inconvenient. And my biggest issue was I was always hungry on the Atkins diet. I could eat, 5 chicken breasts and still be hungry, or 5 slabs of bacon, whatever. So that was my biggest issue, was just, I always felt hungry, and I hated that feeling, and I remembered when I was in high school and practicing IF, not realizing it, I wasn't hungry. So, that's kind of where it all came into. And basically, if you read my book, it goes through the entire diet journey, weight loss journey. I lose weight, I gain weight, I'm practicing IF, not realizing it. I'm getting comments from family members saying, you're too skinny, you're not eating. So finally, 2018, I stopped the dieting mentality. I said, you know what, I'm going to be healthy. My family comes first. At this point, I have 3 children, 3 small children, 2 in school, 1 not. And I thought, I'm going to be happy with my body. That's it. That's the most important thing. So I stumble across this really obscure documentary on Amazon Prime, The Science of Fasting. And I put it on actually thinking it might be about meditation. I was really big into meditation at the time. And so I thought it maybe had to do with monks, or like, I just imagined monks meditating and fasting. And no, it actually had to do with fasting and the science of fasting, as it said, and learned about just so many fascinating topics and benefits of fasting. So that kind of sparked my interest, and kind of made me remember, well, man, I used to do that. I used to fast. I used to intermittent fast, and I had actually tried intermittent fasting in 2010 and did not go well because I was so used to eating throughout the day. So I as much as I didn't want to try it, I kind of made some agreements with myself. And again, you'll see that in the book. You know what? If I try this, it can't interfere with family time. It can't require me to do any exercise that I don't want to do. And it has to be cost effective. That was the other thing. I don't want to be going to a fasting retreat or buying some special drinks. It had to meet all these little requirements. And I started asking myself, what if this can help me? What if this is something that is good for me? What if this is the last diet that I will ever have to try? Diet. And even the word diet, I discovered, does not mean what we make it mean these days. So that's basically how it started, the what if diet plan. I started asking myself what I call good what if questions, which help me see the possibilities rather than just staying stuck in our limiting beliefs. So that's kind of where the book came from. That's my kind of shortened history with diet. As you said, I go pretty in depth in the book. So
I liked it though. I think it's necessary sometimes for people to kind of garner. There's a lot of fasting books that will just say, listen, here's how I got here. Here's my quick story, even in like, the introduction. And then they just drop straight into the science. And I wonder who they're really, well, I don't wonder. They're clearly marketing towards people that don't need a great deal of story or testimony or intimacy with their author. And I think it drops out on a lot of people. And so I think your book does such a great job of kind of narrating, even if you're not like relating to this individual, for me is crucial in communicating, even the science of something to it. And the what if exercises, even as you said that, those are actually written out in your book in the different instances when you sat down and said, what if eating at 9 p.m. wasn't taboo or bad for me? What if my body could burn food through the night? All these different areas that I think so many people can relate to, that they've done something similar to, and disarming those harmful beliefs, and really meditatively like reprogramming yourself in and around all of it, and then coming to ultimate success in the end. And I think a lot of people think of, you even address the fact that fasting, weight loss is not ultimate success. And another one of your what ifs, like what if there were benefits from fasting outside of weight loss? All of these things kind of play out, and I think it's so crucial to you tying and weaving in your own personal story and narrative. I really did appreciate it. But before we start unpacking it more, because as you can tell, I could go on and on, I just want to go with some terms to have you help me unpack them so that the audience and I know how you're defining things in your head. And again, this is not meant to cause anxiety with anyone, rather than just to understand how you're defining them in your own mind's eye. So let's start off with fasting. How would you describe fasting?
So for me, fasting is not eating, not consuming. Well, wow, that's actually difficult. Okay, so fasting for me is not consuming food. uh it is drinking water. I drink water, I drink black coffee. But I think, and if I'm doing like a 24-hour fast or a 72-hour fast, I will drink bone broth. I think that's very nourishing for the body. I guess for me, since I use fasting as a nourishment, I almost feel like it goes in tandem with food. It really does. I feel like our body needs that rest just as much as it needs the food. So for me, fasting is not eating anything, but I also, I write about this in the book, I do not believe in consuming non-caloric items as well. So artificially sweetened anything, artificially flavored anything. Now, that being said, I do leave it up to people to kind of make that choice for their own. For me, if I drink an artificially sweetened beverage during a fast, I am immediately hungry. That insulin spikes and I want to eat. And so for me, it's very important. That's kind of where I stuck with fasting, is I like not being hungry. I like the convenience of it, not having to think about food. So I stay away from artificial sweeteners. and I'm sure other experts would probably agree. But again, I allow people to make that choice for themselves. If they need some artificial sweetener in their life and they feel like it helps them get through, a fast, not eating, not digesting food for a few hours, then you know what, more power to you. I mean, to each their own.
Yeah. Okay. Absolutely. How would you just as like casually define intermittent fasting? What does that term mean to you?
To me, it just means not eating for a few hours. I mean, even I think Dr. Fung said it. Every night when we sleep, we're fasting. We are intermittent fasting already. So, to me, intermittent fasting is just, again, not eating for a few hours. And in my book, I recommend that everybody start with at least a 12-hour fast. You can see benefits from a 12-hour fast. And a lot of times we try to jump straight into that 16-hour fast, 16-8 window. And although there are definitely benefits to that, it can be really difficult for someone who is so used to eating 6 times a day, meals and snacks. So for me, intermittent fasting is just going a while without eating, several hours, as long as you can. And again, just asking, you can, there's certain things you can do to make that easier for you, but that's basically it. I try to keep it simple.
Yeah, absolutely. Your book gets into hormones, and so we'll talk about those later when we unpack the book. But do you ever use the word autophagy? And if you do, what do you mean by it?
So autophagy, for me, from how I understand it, it's basically, I think it actually means eating eating itself, eating your eat, I don't know. Okay, well, for me, autophagy is basically cleaning out the body. It's doing a little spring cleaning. So when we're not eating, our body is resting, and when I say resting, I don't necessarily mean sleeping. I mean even our gut is resting. It's resting from digesting food, and uh it's allowing the cells to kind of come in and clean out, or clean out or heal those damaged cells that are in there. So autophagy just kind of comes in and cleans everything out, gets everything kind of refreshed for the day. It's supposed to be helpful for just about everything, reducing inflammation, helping your immune system. I mean, and I do touch on autophagy in the book because to me, that's the best benefit of IF, of intermittent fasting. But at the same time, I feel like I'm not qualified to truly explain everything. So I recommend, if anyone wants to learn more about autophagy, please, please, please do yourself a favor, read Dr. Fung's book, The Obesity Code. And Dr. Walter Longo also has some great research as well. So that's my take on autophagy.
Yeah, absolutely. OMAD, there's a lot of people that confuse or conflate or just want to assign this to the same thing as intermittent fasting. What
Mhm.
does OMAD mean, if anything, to you? And is there a difference between intermittent fasting or a distinction among it?
OMAD for me, I mean, it means one meal a day.
Mhm.
Now, again, I kind of try to keep everything simple. So I guess for if you want to get real specific, it's eating one meal a day, I guess, for that 1 hour, and then that's it. You don't need anything else. But to me, if you're eating one meal a day, it could be through the span of 2 or 3 hours. So
Yeah.
again, I kind of shy away from those terms. Only get on them. I know where that kind of comes from. When I used to get stuck on the phrases and the wording. The 16-8, the fast, eat, stop, eat. You have to fast for at least 6. I really don't use a lot of that. I don't think I do in the book. There are days when I do eat one meal a day. I'm just not hungry. But then there are days when I break my fast at noon, and so again, just kind of to each their own, and whatever people prefer.
Yeah, and do you involve yourself with, or do you speak frequently? The last thing I heard you saying is that it wasn't some of the you were mentioning 16-8 and all of those different things, and for you just clarified, like, sometimes I do OMAD, sometimes I eat twice a day. I'll break my fast at noon. So, and what I wanted to jump in right there and ask is, are there other key terms that you talk about in your book or anything like that? There's a lot of buzzwords, and I just want to make sure that if you use them, we know your definition. So there's things like keto or the warrior diet or
Okay.
meal skipping. Do you have any specific ones like those that you use in your book, or is it all pretty much generated towards intermittent fasting?
Um, I would say it's pretty much it is generated towards intermittent fasting. The only phrase I think I use that's is IF. I call intermittent fasting IF a lot. But yeah, I don't really use a whole lot of those terms when talking about it. And again, in speaking, a lot of the times when I talk to people about intermittent fasting, it's people who don't know a whole lot about it. So maybe that's probably why I don't use those terms very often, because they're not going to know what they are anyway. I try to keep it very user friendly and very basic, I guess.
Okay. I want to switch now into looking at your book, and I want to first unpack it with the impetus or the inspiration for writing it. You have this own personal journey, but there are plenty of people that have journeys that don't turn to writing a book. What was your reason for writing it?
Well, okay, so I started when I started intermittent fasting, finding the science behind it and seeing it actually work for me. One of the first things my first emotions, I guess, was anger. I was so angry that this had been available to me this whole time, and it wasn't an eating disorder, and it wasn't weird. There were so many times in my life where I thought, why can't I just eat like a normal person? Why do I eat and then I'm hungry right after I eat? Why, and then when I was fasting, I felt fine. I felt fine, but it's
Mm.
like, why can't I just eat 6 times a day like I'm supposed to? So anger is actually what got me. Anger and frustration is kind of what got me writing. I kind of started journaling, and then I thought, well, you know what? Let me after 10,000 words of journaling, I thought, well, let me put this into a blog. And I started putting my personal story into a blog, and at that time I was calling it my what if diet plan, because I was really just learning as I go.
Mm.
And of course, once you start losing weight, people start asking, what are you doing? What are you doing? And, what's your secret? That kind of thing. And at the time, I kind of was secretive about it. I didn't want to say, and again, maybe this is a cultural thing, but I didn't want to say, well, I'm not eating. So fortunately, by the time 2018 was around, intermittent fasting was already kind of a thing. I think now it's everywhere, which is great. So it wasn't too difficult to explain it as it had been, like, say, in high school or in college. So I started telling people about it, and people started asking about it. And, I would tell them, well, you can find my story on my blog, but the blog really didn't have a lot of the steps of what I use. So I have three phases that you can go through. And that's where I started. I thought, you know what, let me put this, I started putting it in the blog, but people always want a book. There's something about a book, and I'm the same way. I just want it there in front of me. So I thought,
Yeah.
you know what, let's put this into a book. And that is basically where it came from. I just I want to help anyone at all who resonates with my story, with, feeling hungry all the time, with not being able to lose that baby weight that, from your baby that's now 10 years old. Anyone who can resonate with that, and especially women too. I think we're so, when it comes to weight and food, there's just so much in our culture that, that makes it harder for us, I think. And then being an Hispanic a Latina woman, that, where our culture is just, I mean, food is everywhere. Food is love. Food is love. Food is nourishment. So again, that's kind of where I wanted to put my story out there. I hope that other people can connect with it and see that intermittent fasting is something that can help everybody. And again, flexibility. You can make your own fasting window. If you don't like to fast for 24 hours, then come up with something else. And that's kind of what my book helps people do. But also asking good questions and showing yourself the possibilities of what you're capable of. So that's where the book came from.
Yeah, I was struck with, I'm not sure it was intended. And so I do want to ask, as a reader, I feel like your audience is really broad. And here's why. It's not just, Latina, Hispanic, women who have 3 children and a full time job in school. It's because you narrate through the different stages of life. I feel like high school children, college children, all of these people can garner something from it, even people of a different gender from you, just because you talk about your stages of life and where fasting was with that, and some of the stigma, and how if you'd gone back and looked at it this way you wish you had known that. And so it appears, at least from a reader's point of view, that there's something that anyone in those stages can garner, and it just broadens your audience level. And I was wondering if that was intended, or if it was something that just kind of happened as you wrote it.
Honestly, I think it wasn't intended. It, you know what? I think that there's so many people who struggle with food and weight issues, and that's probably why it's so broad, because that's really who I was trying to reach. Anybody who struggles with food and weight. Um, I guess where, I like I said, I have kids, I have a full-time job. I'm also going to school part-time. And then I'm writing a book. I'm crazy. but yeah, like you said, you don't have to be that. I struggled with this my whole life. I struggled with this when I was in college and single with no kids. And so again, I think maybe it reaches such a broad audience because of that. There's so many people out there. I don't care what your socioeconomic status. I don't care what your success level. One of the people that I love her. I think is it Edith, Eva. I can't remember. One of the people, the Fasting Lane. She wrote the book, The Fasting Lane, Life in the Fasting
Eve.
Lane. Oh, that's the
Yeah,
podcast. Eve.
Eve.
There
Yeah.
we go. I loved her take on it when she mentioned, she's like, I'm so successful in so many of these different areas. Why can't I lose weight? And again, so I think that's where it just reaches so many people, because it doesn't matter what your background is. If you're struggling with food and weight, you're struggling with food and weight, and I think that's probably where it came from. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering, you mentioned the 3 phases, but kind of breaking out the core tenets of your book and how it's designed. Can you kind of unpack a little bit of that for people listening so they know what to expect when they pick it up?
Sure, not at all. I don't mind sharing this at all. Basically, phase one, I call it bring it in, and let me see, bring it in and wait, push it back and bring it in. There we go.
Mhm.
So I suggest start slow and don't even focus on the scale for the first, I suggest at least the first 3 weeks. Just focus on bringing in your fasting window. So if you're used to breaking your fast, eating breakfast at 8 in the morning, then start by, pushing your window in to maybe 9 or 10. That's what I did. And you will feel, if you're used to eating throughout the day, you will feel some hunger pain. So a lot of people think, oh, that's not enough. No, it's enough. It really is, because it's just enough of a challenge to kind of, and I think too, a lot of times, I actually got this information from a friend who read it. For her, she said breakfast is just, I'm not even hungry, it's just a comfort, it's just a habit. And so just kind of not having that habit in place, it was hard, even though she wasn't physically hungry. It's just she's so used to having her breakfast, in the morning. So again, I suggest that people start by just simply pushing their breakfast back by 1 hour or 2 hours, and bringing their window in, closing their eating window. For me, when I started, I want to say I started from 10 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock in the evening, and it was very doable for me. So 12-hour eating window, stick with that for at least 3 weeks. Phase two is shrink your window. Shrink it, whether you want to shrink it from the morning or the nighttime. And as you mentioned before, I kind of speak to that about eating at night. That was one of those taboo things for me. You're not supposed to eat at night. You can't go to bed on a full stomach. And that's where the what if process comes in. So, the thing is, the steps, the phases, they sound very simple, but when you're implementing them, we are all going to have our own little obstacles that we run into, our own little reasons why we can't stick to it. And that's where asking those good questions comes in. What if eating at night is not a cardinal sin, a cardinal dietary sin? That's what I call it. What if your body can digest food at night while you're sleeping? And of course, I'm not talking about eating well, no, I have eaten like say a pizza before bed. Don't do that. I do not do that a lot. I wouldn't suggest doing that. But my point is, it's just, it has to be a way that you can live for life. And phase 3 is watch yourself. And again, I know that sounds very simplistic, but I tell myself that all the time, girl, you better watch yourself. It's basically watching your thoughts and making sure that you are feeding your brain some good thoughts to think and asking yourself some good questions. Um, Minding what you are putting, just as important as it is to eat healthy food for our body, it's just as important what we put into our mind. And so all 3 phases combined together, I mean, it sounds very simple, but it takes work. It really does. It takes daily work. And so that's where, in the book, I kind of describe certain things that you can do to make the process easier, to make fasting easier. Some good questions you can ask yourself. And I encourage people to ask yourself, challenge yourself, but don't beat yourself up. And I think that's the other big thing is we tend to beat ourselves up. And when we beat ourselves up, we lose that opportunity to learn from what, I don't even want to call it a mistake, just from what we did that maybe we don't like. And so that's kind of where the book, again, the phases, very simple sounding, but then there's just so much to it. So
yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, one of the things that resonated with me personally, and without getting into too much of a testimony that nobody wants here, is that I think it unifies us a lot as women in particular, but I think there are a lot of people that could speak to this. I feel like I was like just born hungry for food, for knowledge. Like this just speaks to me as a person. People are thirsty, I'm hungry. Like I am like always hungry for more, and that includes food. As a child, I felt just constantly hungry, and I was drawn to foods and lifestyles that were satiating. So I never met a potato I didn't like. It's impossible. You can't do anything to a potato that I wouldn't die for. So there's just certain things that fill you up, make you full, and then 10 seconds later, you talk about this a lot yourself, I just felt hungry again. And I was drawn to cultures that celebrated it. I was drawn to all sorts of things as a young adult and then an adult. And the true irony that I discovered that you do a really good job of articulating very elegantly in a lot of different ways. I don't think that you say it just once. I think you say it a few times in different ways. But the irony of practicing fasting was the hunger goes away, and it becomes a completely different relationship. And actually, you talk about this even in college when you said, I actually enjoyed what it felt like to actually feel hungry, or in high school. Your very beginning, you said you actually were enjoying the idea of what real hunger actually felt like, and for me, one of the greatest ironies that I try to convey to anybody that I don't apostatize much, but if I'm trying to convince someone of the benefits of fasting, I say, I've been a slave to just feeling hungry and thinking about everything that comes from that. Where am I going to eat? Who am I eating with? Am I going to break my rules? Do I have rules? It's just weighing on me all the time. And it's just so ironic to me that, fasting and removing how many times you ate. I've never met anything more in my life that completely depletes the hunger and the weight that it carries with it. It wasn't just that I wasn't
a little.
Oh, okay. It wasn't just that I wasn't. Let me see if I can get it again.
Oh no.
Oh, I hope it does not happen again. Can you hear me? Here we go. Let me switch networks. Let's see. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. So anyway,
we got this.
Yes, we're gonna do this. It's not just the hunger that abated. It's everything, all the baggage that I wasn't aware that went with it. The thoughts, the constant nagging, the renegotiating, all of those things that came with the hunger went away. And the liberty and the amount of time I gained back, you describe a lot of those things through different phases in your book, and how you didn't even have time for exercise. And I like that, the idea of, in my 20s, 90 minutes at the gym was fine. But in my 30s, it was I didn't even want to do that anymore. So I was wondering if you had realized that tenet, because it resonated so much with me in reading it. Is it something that is central to you, or did you find it shocking when you finally came through your fasting journey? You'd gone through essentially 3 decades worth of this bird's eye view of looking at different pieces and different moments of your life doing it. Did it always occur to you that fasting made you less hungry and less of a slave to food and hunger,
No.
or was it something that came about later on?
It was definitely something that came about later on. I always attributed my, like in my 20s, I talk about I actually worked, ironically, I worked at a fast food restaurant as a manager. That was the only job I could get after college,
Yeah.
and at the time. And I talk about, I worked the early shift. So my shift started at 6 a.m. in the morning, went all the way to 4 p.m. And that's actually when I started fasting, just by missing breakfast. But eventually I talk about how much energy I have. I call myself a hummingbird on steroids, because I was just all over the place. And I always attributed that to, I was skinny, or I drank a lot of coffee, or I guess I always attributed how good I felt to the fact that I was thin, and I don't think I even say this in the book, but just kind of reflecting on it now, I just kind of figured that, oh, well, I was skinny and that's why I had all these great things happening. And no, it was the fasting. And it wasn't just the fasting, it was the fact that the fasting worked for me. I think that's another thing. I
Yeah.
don't want women or anybody to feel like, oh, she fasted for, she fasted for, however, I was probably fasting for 20 hours at that time, not realizing it. That worked for her, it has to work for me. That's not the case. Everybody is just a little bit different. So I had no clue that fasting could give you energy, or, like you said, take away that hunger, that constant hunger. And I do talk about that in the book. Just, I'm always hungry. Why am I always hungry? And yeah, just all the time you waste thinking about, what am I going to eat? How many calories, how many carbs, how many, or even if you're not counting calories, what's for dinner? What am I going to cook? What's this? You know, it's just, it's incredible once you start fasting, and once your body starts using its fat for fuel. um, your time is just, I attribute fasting to writing this book. I feel
Yeah.
like it just allowed me to have so much freedom in my life, and to take back all that time, all that wasted time and energy, focusing on food. And then, I also mentioned, I'm still a foodie. I love food.
Mhm.
I still love food. I still, eat, and I will break my fast on certain occasions. But it just gets easier and easier over time to not do it. I talk about eating brunch with my family. That
Mm.
was a big one for me. Oh my goodness. I have to eat brunch with the family. I can't let my kids not see me eat. And
Yeah.
now it's just to the point where they don't think about it. I don't think about it. I don't eat food throughout the day. I have my coffee, I have my water, and it just doesn't even, I don't think about it. It's so natural. And again, just freeing. So
Yeah.
yeah, when I was fasting in error back in my younger years, no clue. I think I really attributed everything to just being skinny. Being skinny is the answer to everything. That's what we tend to think as a culture, and it's
I
so not
know.
true. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
It's true. I agree. I couldn't agree more. And I think if you fluctuate, if you've ever fluctuated in your life, I have 4 children. I fluctuated obviously naturally with pregnancy and times before that. And I think you very quickly realize that being thin is not the answer that you thought it would be, nor is being heavy the curse that it's played out to be, I think, as well. There are people that find incredible freedom at all different weights. For me, I
Yes.
think fasting, the mental clarity, the acuteness, I fight for like mental focus and clarity, like a marathon runner on an ultra marathon. Like, I just love it more than anything, being
Yeah.
able to be crystallized. And it's because of the 4 kids and so many things going on, like
Oh
yourself in
yeah.
your life. I think young parents are like, what now? Is it legal? Will it keep me awake? Where can I get some? I mean, just
Exactly. Yeah.
horrifying things. And fasting, there's nothing that will make me more clarified and able to like focus on research or work than fasting will. And there's just all of these other, benefits or attributes to it as well. I want to
And
turn
so
now to our
after all,
rapid,
sorry.
right.
Yeah.
No, you're fine. I want to turn to rapid fire questions because we talked and we've had a lot of people write in specifically wanting us to ask different cultural and ethnic groups that write in or that are coming on the show. And I'm really excited to have a Latina and a Hispanic woman speak to us because we've had people write in who want me to talk to that culture in general. Most people who've listened to the podcast know that I'm located in San Diego, California. And I really, one of the reasons I chose to move here is because it's a border town hugging two countries. I like that cultural diversity. I need it in my life, and I like raising my children in it. And so it's exciting to talk about the differences between different cultures and also as it is within that community. And so with that, I want to start off with asking you, number one question is misconceptions that you hear most about fasting from people in your community.
Oh, it's starving. You're starving yourself. That's
Yeah.
usually the first thing that people think. It's starving, or even those that don't think it's starving, they still feel like it's very it's very deprivating. Um, you're just going to feel hungry all the time, and I know these were all my thoughts too. I'm like, what could be more deprivational than not eating? Making yourself not eat. And I think a lot of times, even if somebody's willing, especially in my culture, if they're willing to um, try fasting, they feel like they have to white knuckle it. Like they just got to get through it. They got to get through it, and you realize that that's not the case. A friend of mine, actually, my husband and his friend, and we all decided to do a 72-hour fast. And the first 24 hours I was fine. The second day it was crazy. But by that third day, surprisingly, the hunger's gone. It is crazy. And I touch on this in the book a little bit. I don't talk about 72 hours fasts, but there is some research that shows that after 72 hours, ghrelin, which is the hunger hormone, I call it the grumpy gremlin of the hunger hormones, ghrelin actually dissipates and you lose that hunger. So us being all, Latino, I think we were all kind of a little bit surprised by that. Like, I've been practicing fasting for a while, so it wasn't too surprising for me. But for my friend and my husband, he kind of knows. I talk to him about it all the time. But for the friend, definitely, he was like, "Oh, this is weird. I'm not hungry. Like, what is this?" And it's just crazy. I have an anecdote in the book as well about smelling food and not
Yeah.
feeling hungry toward it. Oh my gosh, that was just a revelation. But I think that's the biggest thing in our culture. If you're not eating, you're sick, or there's something wrong, or just there's just something. It's not right. And then too, in our culture, in the Hispanic culture, and I guess other cultures too, it's very rude to turn down food. If somebody has
Right.
made something for you, you can't turn it down. And that was a big one for me for a long time. And it's funny because now I accept the food. I just don't eat it right then and there. And I tell them, I'll say, oh, thank you. I'm gonna go ahead and save this for home. But it's just funny how it used to be so hard for me. If somebody offered, something, especially something homemade, I mean, I had to eat it there in front of them. Otherwise, that was very rude. So those are some of the cultural things I see in the Hispanic community, kind of surrounding fasting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because some of those things I think I still would like encourage my child to do. The idea of my child turning their nose up at something that their grandmother made, I'd be like, "What are you talking about? Put that in your mouth right now." It's just like it's funny how I hold on to some of those, even though I myself would be like, hmm.
Yeah.
Um, we have people wrote in that asked about like, have you discovered key phrases or assets or resources that help you describe like the benefits of fasting to your community? Have there been bridges or gateways where you're
Uh-oh.
kind of like, oh, let's see. Are we back? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Uh, so I was asking, have you discovered? We've had people have written in asking about bridges or gateways or doctrines or documents or key phrases that you found to kind of usher in people in your family or your community that don't really get fasting to kind of break the ice into some of its health and benefits when they question you about it.
um, yeah, I definitely do. I guess one, just I talk about it so much. That's probably that's probably where people come in. But I always recommend, I can't help it. I always recommend Dr. Fung's book,
Yeah.
The Obesity Code. Now, one of the things about that book is it is pure science, but I love that. I'm a total nerd when it comes to, when it comes to, especially with the body. I've always been interested in the mind body connection, you know, growing up. Um, we actually do have some mental illness in our family. And so
Yeah.
growing up, I always kind of wanted to know if there's a button in our brain that we could push to, you know, that kind of thing. So I was always very interested in neurochemistry and you know, that kind of thing. And then just the body as well, again, the mind body connection. So if you're interested in science, the scientific part of it, definitely Dr. Fung's book, and he breaks it down. He makes it so user friendly. Um, I think that's the book that really just kind of got me started on the research part of things. For a more user friendly platform, a really good podcast. I don't. I have to be honest. I don't listen to it much anymore, just because I kind of already have my own, you know, my own way, I guess. But there is a podcast called the Intermittent Fasting Podcast. Two ladies who answer a ton of questions and just provide great resources for people. And I think that podcast did help me in the beginning because it was two women talking about intermittent fasting, very healthy. One of them was a school teacher. I believe she's retired now. And her name is Jen Stevens. She actually wrote another book, Delay, Don't Deny, very popular in the community. But just being able to see these two normal women with real lives, not supermodels, not, you know, anything weird, being able to see them utilize fasting and talk about it in such a natural way, that really helped me. So,
Yeah.
you know, those are a couple of the things I use. And then of course there's a lot of apps. I can't remember off the top of my head. Um, there's one that utilizes social media kind of, and so a lot of people find that very comforting. They can kind of connect with other people going through similar things. So those are some of the, you know, the things I recommend for people who are interested. And then of course talk to me. I'm
Yeah.
always open to talking to people. So yeah.
Have you, along the line of the apps and things like that, have you gotten into tools that you use? Do you get into glucose meters? Like, have you used any of those in your fasting journey, or have you kept it more socially and how you physically feel, your own intimate relationship with it?
I've definitely kept it more, like you said, socially and how I feel. I did use, there's an app called Zero, a very simple app that kind of gives you a timer, I think, when your windows are up. So I used Zero for a while just to kind of make sure I was within my window. But then once I kind of started doing it naturally, I lost that. Now my mom, though, who also intermittent fasts, I got her into it a couple, you know, when I started. She is a type 2 diabetic, so she definitely is, you know, monitors her blood glucose, and she has gotten off of her meds, she's gotten off of her insulin. And the thing about my mom too is she is not overweight at all. She's like 125 pounds. She's a little thing. So when she was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, we were all shocked. She ate healthier than we did, you know, oatmeal in the morning and fruit and all that kind of stuff. Come to find out, she, you know, she had this issue that we had no idea about. So I always kind of look to her for that kind of, you know, when it comes, I don't write about her in my book, but just, you know, letting everyone know. um Again, like you even mentioned, weight is not necessarily, you know, determining factor on whether you're healthy or not. So but yeah, so my mom she does use her blood glucose meter. She makes sure that she's within her, you know, I can't think right now, but she makes sure
Yeah.
she's under the limit. um yeah, I don't use anything like that. I really go by how I feel. I'm very intuitive when it comes to that stuff. And again, the social aspect as well. I just try to make sure that it fits within my lifestyle. And if something doesn't work one day, well, then the next day we try again.
Absolutely. We've had a lot of people write in asking about like your top sabotages for fasting, breaking fast, and things like that. And if any of them are culturally based or if it's just a personality based thing.
Okay. My first top sabotage for me personally was artificial sweetener. I always drank my coffee with creamer and like sweet and low or stevia, whatever, you know. That was always how I drank my coffee. And even when I was younger, and I effing in error, I probably still drank that. So I survived. I mean, I survived. I did it back then, but now I don't. I again, I'm very experimental and very intuitive. So I find that if I have artificial sweetener in my coffee, it breaks my fast. It doesn't break my fast, but it makes me hungry, and I will break my fast. And so, but some people can use it, and that's fine. But that's been the number one saboteur for me, was artificial sweetener. And when I started reading about the reasons why, it made total sense. It spikes your insulin, and it basically, you're trying to trick your body into thinking that it's eating. Your body's not dumb. There's no food coming in, but it has that sweetness. And there's actually a study that I refer to in my book. Just one sip of artificial sweetener actually induced hunger, or induced insulin in people. So that was a big one for me. Um, the other thing that can sabotage, I mean, honestly, what we think, how we think, what we think of ourselves, what we think of others, not putting ourselves first. A big one, and I touch on this in the book, a big one is sleep. I did not realize the
Yeah.
importance of sleep when I was fasting. I would come home and just ravenous, and of course I'm thinking, well, it's because I haven't eaten all day. But yesterday I was fine. What's going on here? And man, when I don't get enough sleep, I mean, I guess the body is just looking for some kind of energy, and if you're not going to give it sleep, it's going to find it somewhere else. So that's been a really big one. And not that I get my full 8 hours a day, but just I know that when I really have not had enough sleep, there's a certain buzz about the hunger that you're feeling, and I'm like, okay, this is not normal for me. What's going on? And I kind of look around to see what kind of factors are playing into that false hunger. um Man, there was one more I was going to mention. I guess just maybe socially, culturally, that was a real big one. People offering food, having a luncheon. And I will break my fast for that. If there's a luncheon coming up and I know about it, I mean, that's great. I want to be able to eat with my friends or my colleagues, and join them in that. And then I just won't eat dinner that night. Maybe I will. And then I guess another one, I wouldn't call it sabotaging, because it is natural. But that time of the month, there's some, when I'm PMSing, I am hungry. I'm hungry by noon, or at least by 3 p.m. And it's funny because I've gotten to where if I get hungry by 3 p.m., I'm like, oh, I look at my calendar, sure enough, I'm PMSing. So, but
Nice.
again, you just kind of have to decide for yourself, is this something that do I really want to eat something, or am I going to wait? And sometimes I do, and just kind of see how I feel from there. I'm all about the feels. For me,
Yeah.
it really started with just trying to make me feel better about myself, and
Yeah.
so, or I guess that's what kept me going.
Yeah, there's a great doctor, Dr. Mindy Peltz, who's been on and a couple of times on my podcast, but she speaks to particularly women fasting and what you're talking to. And I know she's one of a handful of doctors that talk about it, but that 5 day period leading up to one's menstrual cycle it's specifically geared. She talks about actually eating for your cycle during that time period for fasters, and it's absolutely genius. It's a very small piece of her book, and you can get her book online for free if you are interested. But I think it's one of the greatest resources for women. I try to tell everybody, because it's not just the hunger and things like that, but it also promotes like a lower. It eliminates a lot of PMS symptoms and things like that. And she wildly advises not to try longer fasts during that time period. And one should already know that, because as you've mentioned, it's horrendously difficult, even for most experienced fasters. So I think that's fascinating. I want to know about the book. Do you have a time when you think it's going to launch, and what venue are you going to launch it across?
So it is actually up for pre-sale right now. It is on Amazon. It will officially launch on November 23rd. And the reason I've picked that date is because that is my mother's birthday. My mother is a lifelong educator. She taught for 36 years, and she is the one that instilled the love for reading and writing in me. So I figured, happy birthday, Mom. So yeah,
That's
November
wonderful.
23rd. Yes, thank you. November 23rd, it will be released on Amazon. It is up for pre-sale right now. I don't have a link on my website, but if you do a search for the What If diet plan on Amazon, it will pop up in there. So yeah, I'm excited.
Awesome. I am too. I can't wait. Alexis, thank you so much for your time and your patience. I know we've had some internet connection issues today, but I think that the information is going to be so well received. It doesn't matter. Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Pleasure talking to you.
Absolutely. For everyone listening, we've been speaking with Alexis Cano. She's an author. You can find out more on the website, the whatifdietplan.com. Again, her book comes out this November. Encourage everyone to jump on and give it a pre-order. And thank you from all of us at Patricia Kathleen Podcast for listening. Remember to be responsible, practice compassion, and always bet on yourself. Sláinte.